own
I'm
sister
sorry,
buried
Amara,
her
but you
alive.
just have to go.
But
The
6
prince
years
is mine.
later,
I can't watch
the
you
woman
marry
she
him.
tried to kill returned as a queen. The moon is high, the night is quiet, and a story is waiting. This is Moonlight Tales by Favie. Now, listen closely. In the village of Umudi, they still whisper about the night the earth swallowed a chief's daughter. They say her own sister covered the grave with shaking hands. They say the forest kept her secret. But what the village does not know is that the girl they buried did not die. And when she returned years later, she did not come back as a victim. She came back as a queen. In the peaceful village of Umudi, ruled by Chief Okafor, not with fear but with wisdom. He was the kind of man who settled disputes under the old Iroko tree, who remembered names, who fed strangers before he fed himself. He had 2 wives, and from them 2 daughters. Adaeze, the first, born of the first wife, was bold, beautiful, and proud. She carried herself like someone already destined for power. She had grown up knowing that as the firstborn daughter, she carried something sacred, a name, an expectation. Amana, the second, born of the younger wife, a quiet woman who died when Amara was still small. Amara had grown up softer, gentle, but strong. She listened more than she spoke, and the villagers loved her for it. She was more open, the kind of girl who sat beside the old women and listened, who brought water before you asked, whose laugh everyone agreed sounded like something good. They were not enemies, not always. There was a time when they were small enough to still share a sleeping mat, when Adaeze used to braid Amara's hair in the dark before they slept, when she would whisper the names of stars she had made up herself just to make her sister laugh. But children grow, and when they grow, they begin to see what the world has decided for them. Adaeze saw it clearly. She was the firstborn, the alliance, the prize. She had spent her whole life becoming worthy of that. Though they shared a father, they did not share affection. Adaeze had always believed the position of power belonged to her. After all, she was the firstborn. One season, news arrived. Prince Obina from the neighboring kingdom of Eke would visit Umuodi. He sought a bride, not only for love, but to unite territories and strengthen peace between kingdoms. His kingdom and Chief Okafor's village had lived in cautious peace for years, the kind of peace that only holds because both sides are too tired to fight. A marriage would seal it, bind 2 bloodlines, secure trade, protect borders. The entire village prepared. They understood what that meant. Adaeze. It had to be Adaeze. She was the firstborn daughter of the chief. She was the obvious choice. She was the dignified choice. She was, in every way that mattered to tradition, the only choice. Adaeze was certain this was her destiny. She wore gold, she practiced royal etiquette, she imagined her future throne. The prince arrived at sunset with his council of elders. He was introduced to both daughters. He listened as both spoke. He watched as both moved through the evening. And in the end, quietly, carefully, without drama, he turned to Chief Okafor and said, "It is the younger daughter I would take to wife." He chose Amara, not for beauty, not for status, but because when she was speaking, she spoke of the people, not herself. The chief paused only a moment before nodding. The elders exchanged looks. And Adaeze did not flinch. She had been raised too well to flinch in public. But something behind her eyes went very, very still. This was not just rejection. This was humiliation dressed as diplomacy. And humiliation is a dangerous seed. She was the firstborn. She had earned this. She had prepared for this. And her younger sister, without trying, without asking, had simply walked in and taken it. Have you ever watched something that felt like it was yours, handed to someone else? Drop a moon in the comments. Let me know you're here. Jealousy, when it first arrives, feels like grief. It aches, it burns behind the eyes. But when jealousy is left alone too long, when it is fed by pride and silence and sleepless nights, it transforms. It becomes something colder, something patient, something that plans. 3 nights before the wedding, Adaeze sat alone in her room. On the floor in front of her, a sheet of parchment, Amara's last letter to a cousin, borrowed and never returned, a pot of ink, a steady hand that had been practicing for days. She had studied her sister's handwriting the way a hunter studies footprints, the way Amara curved her letters, the slight lean to the right, the looping tail on the letter A. By the time the candle burned low, the letter was done. It said everything Adaeze needed it to say. The next morning, she went to Amara's room. For the first time in years, she spoke softly. "I want us to be sisters again," she said. "Come with me to the sacred forest tomorrow to perform the old ritual of forgiveness between sisters, so you leave this home with peace between us." Amara looked at her for a long moment. She was not a foolish girl, but she was a kind one. And kindness, when offered a reason to believe, wants to believe. "Yes," she said, "I will go with you." The next evening, under the cover of dusk, they walked into the forest. Adaeze walked ahead as she always had. She knew exactly where she was going. She had dug the pit 3 nights before, covered it with palm leaves, carefully, the way you cover something you intend to leave behind. She stopped at the edge and turned to her sister with a smile. "Stand here," she said. "This is where the ritual begins." As Amara stepped forward, the ground disappeared. She fell. Her scream echoed through the trees. Adaeze stood at the edge, trembling. She did not look down. She filled the pit with the soil she had left piled nearby. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not stop. She walked quickly, quietly, and when she was done, she straightened her wrapper, smoothed her hair, and walked back toward the village alone, the forged letter already in the folds of her cloth. She told the entire villagers that her sister had run away in fear of royal responsibility and went ahead to hand the forged letter to Prince Obinna as clear evidence. Amara did not die. The pit, unknown to Adaeze, connected to an ancient escape tunnel built generations ago during tribal wars. Broken, bruised, barely breathing, Amara crawled in darkness for hours. She followed air. She followed instinct. She crawled through the tunnel on her hands and knees, dirt in her mouth, darkness pressing on every side, following the air, the way a root follows water. She crawled for what felt like days. She pushed through the mouth of the tunnel at the edge of the forest. Her voice, when she tried to call out, was barely a thread of sound, but it was enough. They found her half buried in the roots at the forest's edge. Her lips were cracked, her hands bloodied. She was barely conscious, but she was alive. If this story is gripping you, tap that like button. It tells me you're right here with me under the moonlight. The hunters carried her to their village, the kingdom of Odinala, and brought her to the herbalist healer, an old woman named Mama Chioma, whose hands had mended more bodies than the village could count. For 3 days, Amara drifted between sleep and waking. The healer fed her broth, cleaned her wounds, spoke quietly to her as though she were a child that needed reminding it was safe. When Amara finally opened her eyes with full clarity, the first thing she said was, "I need to go home." It was the queen of Odinala who came to see her on the 4th day. Her name was Lolonena. A woman who had lived long enough to know the difference between anger and truth, between a wound and a war. She sat beside Amara's mat and listened to everything, every word, without interruption. When Amara finished, the queen was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You want to go back and tear down what she built. I understand that. But a fire that burns too quickly leaves nothing, not even warmth. What you carry right now is not justice. It is pain wearing justice's face. Go back when you are not running towards something. Go back when you are standing in something." Amara wanted to argue, but she was too tired, and somewhere beneath the fury, she knew the queen was right. She stayed. Time passes, seasons turn, months become years. She earned her place in Odinala the way real things are always earned, slowly, through service, through presence, through showing up when it would have been easier not to. She taught the younger women to read. She sat in on the queen's councils and began, carefully, to speak. She remembered the way her father had settled disputes under the Iroko tree and found that wisdom lived in her too. Queen Inenna was not easily impressed. She had ruled Odinala alone after losing her husband in war. But she saw something in Amara. Not royalty, not status, but resilience. Amara did not beg, she walked. She built trust among the people. The queen began to lean on her, not as a servant, as a voice. And then there was Emeka, the hunter who had found her. He had not sought her out with grand declarations. He had simply stayed close, not out of pity, but out of something he couldn't quite name. He brought firewood without being asked. He walked beside her, not ahead of her. On the nights when the grief came back and sat on her chest, he did not try to lift it. He just sat beside her in the dark and let her know she was not alone in it. Love, when it is real, does not arrive like a storm. It arrives like morning. You don't notice it coming. You only realize one day that it is already there. They married in the 3rd year, quietly, with the queen's blessing and the hunter's drumming and a joy that Amara had not expected to feel again. Years passed. Amara transformed from a wounded girl into a strategic, wise woman. When Queen Nena fell ill, she made a decision that shocked the council. She named Amara her successor, not by blood, but by merit. Back in Umudi, the letter had done its work. The village grieved Amara in the strange, unfinished way you grieve someone who did not die, but simply left. There was no funeral to close the wound, just a slow, aching absence. Chief Okafor aged in the years that followed. His friends said it was time. His body said it was something else. He kept Amara's childhood wrapper folded at the foot of his sleeping mat. He never moved it. Adaize had married the prince, but it was not the life she imagined. The prince was distant, the people whispered. He was not cruel to her, he was simply not present. He sat at their meals and looked at the door. He fulfilled his duties to the alliance and carried the quiet of a man who had learned to want nothing. Adaize had what she wanted: the title, the compound, the prince's name beside hers. But here is the thing about hollow victories: they echo. Every day, in the silence of her husband's indifference, in the way her father's eyes still searched the path to the gate, she heard it, the echo of what she had done. In Odinala, the seasons had been kind. Queen Nena passed by the 5th year. Amara was no longer simply a woman the queen had taken in. She was now the crown queen of Odinala kingdom. She ruled with wisdom and grace. She settled disputes among the villagers with both fairness and grace. She became a powerful woman who had turned her pain into purpose so quietly that most people didn't realize what they were watching. She had built something real, something that was entirely hers. And beside her, Emeka had built too. A household, a name, a life that asked nothing of her past and everything of her present. It was on a calm evening in the 6th year, while she sat outside watching her son, yes, a son, play in the last of the daylight, that Amara made her decision. Not from anger, not from revenge, from readiness. She was finally standing in something solid enough to walk home from. Then news spread like wildfire. The Queen of Odinala would visit Umudi for diplomatic talks. Don't go anywhere. What happens when she returns is the part that will stay with you. The delegation from Odinala arrived at the outskirts of Umudi in the early morning. The royal emissaries, 2 senior council members, and at the front was a woman in a royal carriage. No one expected who stepped out of the royal carriage. Draped in indigo silk, crowned in gold, walking with calm authority, her husband at her side, her back straight as the old Iroko tree. Amara, alive. The earth had not claimed her. Destiny had. A young girl, one who had been born the year Amara disappeared, ran ahead to the chief's compound shouting, "The Queen of Odinala is here! She says she knows the chief! She says..." Chief Okafor was already walking before the girl finished speaking. He did not move for a long moment. His mouth opened, no sound came. His eyes, old, tired, weathered by 6 years of half-grief, filled with something he had stopped allowing himself to feel. Amara walked to him slowly. She did not run. She did not cry. Not yet. She placed her hands over his and stood before him, simply, the way you stand before someone you love when words are not enough and presence has to carry everything. "Nami," she said quietly, "my father." He folded around her like a man who had been holding his breath for 6 years. And she saw. The 2 women looked at each other across the compound. No words, no screaming, no dramatic collision. Just eyes, and the weight of everything those eyes had seen. Adaze's hands began to shake. Truth, when it has been buried long enough, does not need to be shouted. It surfaces on its own. It began quietly, the way these things always do. The village trembled. Adaze could barely breathe. But Amara did not scream. She did not accuse. Instead, during the royal gathering, she spoke publicly. Betrayal buries the body, but it cannot bury destiny. Silence covered the crowd. Adaze fell to her knees. The truth poured out in tears. The village expected punishment, exile, imprisonment, death. But Amara chose differently. She stripped Adaze of royal title, removed her influence, and assigned her to serve in the healing houses of the village, the same people she once looked down on. Power, Amara said, is not inherited. It is proven. Amara never returned to claim her old life. She did not reclaim the prince. She did not seek revenge, because the throne she now sat on was earned, not given. And in time, Omode learned a lesson whispered from generation to generation. The grave you dig for another may become the doorway to their destiny. Sometimes, the deepest wounds become the widest doorways. Sometimes, what someone meant to end you only teaches you how to begin. And sometimes, just sometimes, the throne that was never meant for you turns out to be the one you are always building toward. And that is how the sister who was buried by blood was crowned by destiny. And that is tonight's tale.
If this story found you under the moonlight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and return when the night calls again. Until next time, the moon will rise, the night will wait, and another story will be waiting. This is Moonlight Tales by Favie.